Thus saith the Lord, behold, I will fill the inhabitants of this land, even the kings that sit upon David's throne, and the priests, and the prophets, and all the inhabitants of Jerusalem with drunkenness. And I will dash them one against another, even the fathers and the sons together, saith the Lord. I will not pity, nor spare, nor have mercy, but destroy them. Hear ye and give ear. Be not proud, for the Lord hath spoken. Give glory to the Lord your God, before he cause darkness, and before your feet stumble upon the dark mountains. And while ye look for light, he turn into the shadow of death, and make it gross darkness. That is Jeremiah 13, 12 through 16. This is Resisting Balaam, a podcast where we seek to encourage the saints to stand firm with him on his word against all the accusations made by the world, the flesh, and the devil, as we engage the culture of death that demands the sacrifice of our children. I am Callie, and this is a Wrath and Grace podcast, so go check out the guys at wrathandgrace.com. I wanted to talk today about polling on abortion. So every, a couple times a year, you'll see these polls pop up, whether they're Rasmussen polls or Barna or Pew or Gallup or whatever. They periodically come up a couple times a year, and every time they do, pro-life organizations and their media arm jumps in with all these clickbait type headlines saying things like 65% of Americans agree with pro-life doctrine of limiting abortion in first trimester or whatever. Sometimes it's as simple as Americans reaffirm how pro-life they are, or most of America believes that abortion needs to be limited in the first trimester. We're winning. This is an abortion-free America, or this is a pro-life America. Our pro-life strategy is working. And then they point to, certain aspects of these polls. This happened, I guess, late September. And I was able to engage with some of these pro-life organizations on their headlines in specific. I should have pulled up the headlines so that I could read them to you. So I don't have an issue pointing to these polls or showing the data from these polls and using it for propaganda. I don't have an issue with that. I think that's actually a pretty good thing to do. Take the data from these polls and show America where they are as far as these basic polls go. And I wanted to do a video back then about this idea, of being honest with what the data is saying and not manipulating in tweaking one small aspect of it that makes the whole entire thing seem like it's saying something that it isn't saying. That I have an issue with. Making a bunch of clickbait type headlines that just really are not true, right? And I decided to wait, one, because I was in a break of doing these episodes, but the election was coming up. So I wanted to wait and see what happened with the election, especially since the Dobbs decision and the pro-life movement is on this high of we're winning. We're winning the hearts and minds of Americans. We've got this forward momentum. These polls are indicating X, Y, and Z thing. So I wanted to wait until after the election to see if the exit polls and the election itself manifested the reality of what they are suggesting that these polls are saying. And what's interesting is a lot of these pro-life organizations and their media people are shocked about what happened in the election. You know, how several states put into their constitution protecting a woman's right to kill her own preborn child, reproduction freedom, or whatever they want to call it. And other states failed to, in their measures, in their pro-life measures, they failed. I mean, like, even things as ridiculous as providing care for a child that's born, you know, surviving an abortion attempt. And they seemed shocked by this. Now, I will admit, it is horrifying. It's horrific that in the ways in which people voted and why they voted for very specific things. And, you know, among a lot of the rhetoric behind why we ought to vote for Democrat legislators and governors and whatever, centered around abortion and voting for abortion even up till birth. And, you know, a lot of the exit polls showed that the largest demographic was unmarried women in birthing age that was in support of these kind of measures and elections. So I wanted to go through some of this polling data and talk about why it didn't surprise me whatsoever, why we should not have been caught off guard, and hopefully in the future when we look at these polls, we actually look at the questions that they're asking and look at all of the information, and instead of just, you know, the one bit that we can twist to make it sound like America is pro-life or, you know, leaning towards their pro-life doctrine. Realistically, most of the data from these polls haven't changed much over the past decade or so. A few small things, and I'll get into that in a second. But what I would suggest is when one of these organizations or media arms make some of these claims that these polls reaffirm the pro-life position, America is pro-life, we're winning, go check out the polls and look at the questions they asked and how many people answered and the ways in which they answered. And here's generically how it comes out, right? Usually somewhere between 8 and 13% will say that abortion should be illegal in all cases, right? And then you have this huge gap in the middle between 65 and 70% that say that abortion should be legal in some or all cases. And then you have a small group at the end. And it traditionally has been about 10 to 13% that say that abortion should be legal in all cases. And most of that has not changed in years. But what has changed is that last group. That last group over this past year has shot up to about 25%. 25% of the people polled now say that abortion should be legal in all cases. In that middle group, if you look at the questions they ask, you know, that they'll say things like, should abortion be legal in the case of incest, in the case of rape, 12 weeks, 15 weeks, 20 weeks, etc. And what you'll find is the vast majority of the people center around the 12 to 15 week area. That's usually where the vast majority of the population finds its the place where they want it to be legislated at, is around that area. And when they ask questions on, do you consider yourself pro-choice or pro-life, that too has been pretty stagnant, about even, you know, in the 55 to 45% range. Again, until this last year, those same polls that these pro-life organizations were quoting in September, October, about how the country is more pro-life and getting behind these pro-life bills and leaning that way, wanting abortion legislated in the first trimester and considering that a win. That poll itself said that 65% of Americans consider themselves pro-choice, which is a 10-point increase. And it just goes to show that, like, really, what's the difference in a pro-life person saying that abortion should be legislated at 12 weeks and a pro-choice person saying abortion should be legislated at 12 weeks? They both want abortion legal in their laws, and they both want their laws to show that abortion is health care. And if you look at a lot of these exit polls from this election, that's exactly what you've found. And within a lot of these states, as they're talking to people, even the pro-life people, pro-lifey people, pro-choice people that want abortion legislated in the first trimester, if given the choice of voting for no abortion in the state and all abortion in the state, they're leaning towards all abortion in the state, even though their personal preference would be to have it legislated around the 12 to 15 week area. It shouldn't surprise us how devastating this election has been when considering abortion. The Dobbs decision, handing everything back to the states rather than saying that you just can't kill human beings, in pro-life states has caused them to limit access to abortion in the healthcare system, closing healthcare facilities. This has driven and caused the rise exponentially of self-managed abortion. One. It's also galvanized in all of the states a lot of these aid and abet movement ideas where they're creating and sustaining infrastructure to help women in these states kill their children. And it's galvanizing people to push abortion laws way to the extreme. Now, I would consider an extreme abortion law any law that treats abortion as healthcare. One thing that we're seeing, and it's coming out in the numbers of these polls, but also the laws that they're pushing, the laws that pro-choice people are suggesting and talking about, they're being honest. We want abortion on demand with no apology for any reason up to birth. The pro-life establishment is unwilling to publicly say, we want abortion treated as homicide. So you have legislators on one side doing exactly what they say they want. And then you have cowardly legislators in the middle that are afraid, because they also look at the polling data. They're afraid of the vast majority of America that wants to keep abortion legal. And so they cave. So instead of using this polling data to like hype up your base and give them a false sense of we're winning, look at it and see what the landscape is really telling us, right? That women really want to kill their children. When we stop seeing them as victims and start seeing them as willing participants, willing to go to drastic measures in order to kill their children, that's when we'll start making actual headway. So I hope you've found this helpful. And when you get a chance, look at the way these polls are phrased and the questions that they ask. And when you do, it's easy to see that any point apart from should be illegal in all instances should be considered a subset of being pro-choice. So this is Resisting Balaam, podcast where we seek to encourage the saints to stand firm with him on his word against all of the accusations made by the world, the flesh, and the devil, as we engage the culture of death that demands the sacrifice of our children.